Coronavirus taking a heavy toll on the retail sector as well.
Is this then the future for the American indoor mall?
Malls and shopping centers used to be a staple of American social life. But as shopping moves into the digital world, brick-and-mortar shops are closing their doors faster than ever before. It's all part of the retail apocalypse that's sweeping through the world and taking down some of your favorite stores. Already, 16 big retailers are going bust. Stay tuned to find out which major retail companies have been the first to collapse. And the bad news is, this is only the beginning.
The worst is yet to come.
The shares are getting hammered today, due in large part to...
At least 60 Disney stores are closing in North America.
What is causing the retail apocalypse? With a looming recession and the cost of living climbing rapidly, the average American is having a hard time paying their bills. And as disposable income has shrunk, retail shopping has become a luxury more than a necessity. In October 2022, gas prices were rising by more than 10% a week. But there's much more to the retail apocalypse than a spike in living costs. And it all started more than a decade ago. The rise of the internet and e-commerce over the past 3 decades has been a threat to traditional shopping. Customers have preferred to compare and buy items online instead of sifting through products in a store. But the tsunami of retail bankruptcies didn't get going until 2011. And that was just the start of a wave of retail giants all around the world falling like dominoes. In 2017, thousands of department stores shut virtually overnight. The final blow to retail was the COVID-19 pandemic, which has changed the way customers live and consume. Stuck in confinement with restrictions, consumers have embraced online shopping, food delivery, and working from home. On top of that, global supply chain issues have been disrupted by the pandemic and now the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, many are reluctant to return to stores. As countries locked down and businesses slowed, the numbers have been frightening. 60% of retailers that filed for bankruptcy in the United States in 2020 had more than $100 million in assets, meaning these were no small fish. The big players have been falling hard. The last 2 years have stretched budgets, sliced up management, and proven just how fragile the retail business is. So, which big retailers have been the first to collapse? 1. CVS Pharmacy. Healthcare is big business, especially in the U.S. And to connect Americans to medicine, Consumer Value Store, or CVS for short, has grown over the last half-century to become the largest pharmacy chain in the country. It is the 4th largest corporation in the U.S., behind Walmart, Amazon, and Apple. But even CVS couldn't survive the onslaught of the retail apocalypse. At the end of 2021, the company announced that it would be closing 10% of its locations, which amounts to 900 of its stores. This will be done in stages, with 300 stores closing down each year over the next 3 years.
CVS, the nation's largest pharmacy chain, is now planning to close as many as 900 stores over the next 3 years.
These closures are expected to drop the company's assets value by more than $1 billion. CVS may be down, but they aren't willing to give up their market share just yet. The company's CEO, Karen Lynch, said that CVS is committed to maintaining a presence in thousands of communities across the country, which they see as an advantage. But they are fighting an uphill battle. CVS is struggling to compete with online competitors, especially e-commerce giant Amazon, which has been moving into the sector. Transitioning into digital sales is the only way to survive, but it's tough for any company to compete with Amazon, no matter how big. 2. JCPenney. JCPenney was one of the biggest surprises to appear on this list. The department store, marketed at middle-class Americans, has been a long staple of American consumer culture. JCPenney has been trading for more than a century, and in 2018, it still ranked 235 on the Fortune 500 list. But that year was the beginning of a disastrous run for the company. By the end of 2018, JCPenney was hemorrhaging customers at a rapid rate. Sales were down more than 5%, and shareholders were losing faith in the company. The number of stores had dropped from 1,077 in 2008 to 872 10 years later, with their yearly revenue following the same dip. The bleeding got a whole lot worse in 2020 when non-essential businesses were forced to close. In May, just 2 months into the restrictions, JCPenney filed for bankruptcy and was delisted from the New York Stock Exchange. By June, 175 stores had closed permanently. But bankruptcy doesn't always mean the end of the road. After months of shopping around for new ownership, Brookfield Property Partners partnered with Simon Property Group to take over JCPenney for $800 million. The owners are hoping to save as many as 60,000 jobs from JCPenney by running new clothing brands and looking for a huge merger with another department store, Kohl's. 3. Disney. Disney might still be churning out movies, TV shows, and digital content, but its retail stores are in trouble. The media giant temporarily closed all its theme parks, halted its cruise liners, and 100,000 of its employees were forced onto government benefits. And for Disney's in-person stores dotted around the country, their operation became unviable. In 2021, Disney announced that they would be closing 60 of their retail stores, which is a third of their global stores. The company's online streaming service, Disney Plus, has boomed in subscribers since 2019 as more people have stayed home and participated in the online economy more than ever. Now, Disney's retail department is taking the cue and shifting online too. Disney's president of consumer products said that they are now focused on creating a more flexible, interconnected e-commerce experience. The company wouldn't reveal exactly how many people would lose their jobs, but they confirmed that there would be a significant number of layoffs. If global giants like Disney can't avoid the retail apocalypse, then what chance do smaller and medium-level retail companies have? 4. Brooks Brothers. Another fashion victim of the pandemic has been Brooks Brothers. The iconic apparel brand has been in business since 1818, making it the oldest in the United States. Its customers have included 40 U.S. presidents and all the top Wall Street bankers. But its history couldn't save it from the last few years of economic turmoil. It was a sign of times as business became more casual and working from home turned office attire from suits to sweatpants. After 200 years of highs and lows, in a Delaware court in mid-2020, Brooks Brothers filed for bankruptcy.
Brooks Brothers is filing for bankruptcy protection.
It's planning to close about 50 of its 200 stores.
And that is the sort of decline in the suit.
As the decision was announced, the company was in the process of closing down 20% of its U.S. retail shops. They were hoping that the bankruptcy filing would help them attract more funding to keep them afloat. And it did. In August of 2020, Authentic Brands Group swooped in to purchase Brooks Brothers for $325 million. 2 years later, and the brand has survived by going casual. 5. GameStop. GameStop made headlines in 2021 when the subreddit Wall Street Bets waged a campaign against a short squeeze. In the space of just a couple of weeks, the share price rose by 1,500% to an all-time high.
Short interest in GameStop.
This GameStop situation is the craziest I think I've ever seen.
But a year earlier, the company was in trouble. In 2020, before the brand was given a new life by high-risk investors of GameStop, the company closed 462 stores due to increasing digital games, a declining console market share, and of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. GameStop is in the middle of restructuring following 2021's losses, and a bump in earnings has given some hope to investors. But it still has a long way to go if it plans to go to the moon. 6. Bed Bath & Beyond. August of 2022 brought bad news for shoppers of home goods. Bed Bath & Beyond announced that 150 of its locations would be closed. Before IKEA became the global norm, this was the place to go for fitting out a new home. It's still listed as a Fortune 500 company, and in 2018 posted net sales of $12 billion. But times have changed. During the pandemic, Bed Bath & Beyond made plans to close 200 of its stores, which made up 20% of all locations. Sales continued to drop from $11 billion to $9 billion. Then again 2 years later, along with shutting 150 stores, the company is axing 20% of its corporate and supply chain staff. Bed Bath & Beyond are also under investigation for a pump-and-dump scheme. 7. Ascena. Ann Taylor grew from a small line of women's dresses into a retail giant. In 1991, it went public and quickly raised more than $160 million of funding. 24 years later, its parent company, Ann Inc., was purchased by the Ascena Retail Group at a value of $2.16 billion. All the signs were good and it looked like a good investment. And Taylor continued to grow with almost 1,000 stores and even moving into the increasingly popular subscription model, where consumers pay a monthly fee to wear clothes as much as they like before sending them back. But any plans for future expansion came to a halt when the global pandemic hit. Halfway through 2020, though, Ascena Retail Group filed for bankruptcy. The company had been struggling to survive for the years leading up to COVID and was keeping itself afloat through some radical methods. That included cutting down store locations and taking out almost $250 million in credit. The pandemic put a stop to any hopes of repaying their debt. Its operating income for 2019 was negative $782 million with 53,000 employees on its payroll. With Ascena's bankruptcy, private equity firm Sycamore Partners moved in to pick up the most valuable brands: Ann Taylor, Loft, Lou & Grey, and Lane Bryant. So as long as it can keep its brand value high enough for investors to keep rescuing it, Ann Taylor lives to fight another day. 8. Lord & Taylor. Even the oldest department store in the States, Lord & Taylor, were no match for the retail apocalypse. The company was bought by Latote for $100 million in August of 2019, and after the pandemic, began slowly reopening its stores. Less than a year later, though, Lord & Taylor went bankrupt and took Latote with it. Between 2020 and 2021, all of Lord & Taylor's shops were closed.
Today came word that the flagship store is counting down its final days and will be closed.
But it's not the end of the Lord & Taylor brand. It was taken over by Sadia Group in 2020 and has been changed into a purely online business. 9. Paper Store. The Paper Store may be a contender for the biggest family-run business in the world. Started by founder Bob Anderson, he and his son John turned a newsstand in Massachusetts into a stationery and gift store that had over 80 locations. But in July 2020, the family business filed for bankruptcy and at the time employed almost 1,000 people. The filing pointed to a dramatic drop in sales amid the pandemic as the main cause. A few months later, though, in October, the Paper Store secured the backing of investors WS Development to come out of bankruptcy. Tom Anderson thanked loyal customers and their hardworking staff for reviving the business. 10. Tailored Brands. Fashion companies were some of the hardest hit in the retail sector, and Tailored Brands, which owns Men's Wearhouse and Joseph A. Bank, was no exception. In 2020, the worst year for retail in the last decade, Tailored Brands announced that they were cutting 20% of their corporate workforce and closing down 500 of their stores. This was a last-ditch effort to save the company from bankruptcy, which Tailored Brands was rumored to be close to. Just like Brooks Brothers, one of the problems was a workforce shifting to more casual attire as employees settled into working from home. And that was a trend experienced worldwide, with men's formal clothing falling 74% in 2020 compared to 2019. The lie support didn't last long, though. Tailored Brands filed for bankruptcy just a few weeks later. 11. Steinmart. Steinmart built itself a reputation as a trusted discount store through its more than 100-year history. But in August 2020, Steinmart filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Listed as the primary reason was the COVID-19 pandemic.
Steinmart. It's filed for bankruptcy. Plans to close almost all of its 300 locations across the U.S.
By October, all 279 of its stores closed down permanently, with liquidation sales offering customers up to 30% off their products. Steinmart still has an online presence as an affordable online women's clothing shop, but there won't be any Steinmart stores opening up again anytime soon. 12. GNC. General Nutrition Centers is a one-stop shop for all things diet-related. Supplements, minerals, vitamins, you name it. If it has to do with improving your body, GNC has it. And they have been in the right business lately. Trends in healthy eating and bodybuilding grew the company to have more than 8,000 stores spread out over 50 countries in 2018. This was rolled out with a franchise business model where franchisees bought the rights to operate with the GNC brand in exchange for the majority of revenue. More than half of these were in shopping malls. As online shopping took over and the pandemic halted retail, GNC began to collapse. In 2020, just 2 short years later after the Chinese-backed Harbin Pharmaceutical Group bid for 40% of the company, GNC filed for bankruptcy and announced that they would be closing more than 1,000 stores. Harbin then completed their takeover for $770 million and cleaned house, replacing the CEO and CFO in 2021. GNC has since taken a different approach, operating through a partnership with Walmart to stock GNC products. There are still more than 2,000 physical locations, and the company has made their way out of bankruptcy and posted $2.5 billion of revenue last year. However, the future of the company is very unclear. 13. Sears. Sears has by far been one of the biggest losers from the retail apocalypse. In 2015, Sears was in the top 20 list of biggest retail companies in the United States. It was the owner of two major retail chains, Sears and Kmart. Ever since an ownership reshuffle in 2004, the number of stores has been dropping. Between 2006 and 2016, more than 2,000 stores shut their doors. But in 2018, the company faced liquidation and filed for bankruptcy. At a bankruptcy auction, the company was won by a last-minute bid for $4.3 billion. But those efforts failed. All Sears stores were closed during the pandemic and never recovered. This year, there are only 15 stores open. In April of this year, one of the last Kmart stores closed, leaving just 3 in the United States. 14. Office Depot. In 2022, the ODP Corporation sales were down more than 10% compared to 2019. Part of these losses were anticipated. The office supply store planned to close 71 locations and added an unspecified number to the list for the next 2-year period. In 2022, the company returned to some success. In August, they partnered with Uber to make their products available to Uber Eats customers. They were the first office supply store to do so and announced the news as the new school year began. 15. Christopher & Banks. It's not only young and fashionable customers who have money to spend on retail shopping, and Christopher & Banks knew that better than anyone. The brand cornered the market with the 40 to 60-year-old women's demographic. Christopher & Banks also catered to plus-sized customers, something very few of their competitors did. This was a recipe for success, catapulting the company's expansion to peak at 451 stores by 2020. However, in what was a familiar story by now, 2020 was a shock to the system, and the company didn't have deep enough pockets to withstand. It turns out that Christopher & Banks were on shaky ground already and struggling to turn a profit, but the COVID-19 pandemic caused revenues to plummet. Earnings fell more than 50% from $88 million to $40 million between 2020 and 2021. That's when management called it quits, filed for bankruptcy, and shut all 451 stores. But Christopher & Banks was bought by iMedia Brands and revived on the online and cable network show Shop HQ. The brand was a hit on Shop HQ and even led to the reopening of some retail stores, with the total in the U.S. now 5. iMedia's chief executive, Tim Peterman, has said that instead of sinking millions into running hundreds of stores each year, resources are dedicated to pushing the products through online and television promotion. And their plan looks to be working. Their customer growth in the last 10 years has shot up by 65%. 16. Pier 1. Possibly the most dramatic collapse in the retail sector was Pier 1. It was once one of the biggest one-stop shops for furniture and decor in North America, but e-commerce had been eating into its market share for years. But in January 2020, the company hit a new low. Failing to attract enough customers, Pier 1 announced that 450 stores would be shut down. Just a month later, they were filing for bankruptcy, and by May, the decision to close all stores was made in bankruptcy court. It wasn't all bad news, though. At the last minute, in June 2020, Retail E-commerce Ventures purchased Pier 1 for $31 million. Their strategy is simple. Buy up failing retail companies at rock-bottom prices and relaunch them in the digital world. Now, Pier 1 is a fully online company with no physical stores. This could be a sign of things to come in the future. Cutting out rent payments, retail staff, and transport costs drastically bring down operating expenses. Have you noticed fewer retail stores in your area? And do you prefer online shopping to malls and shopping centers? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss out on our next video.